Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Babylon 5 versus Deep Space Nine. Just so everyone knows, you can follow us on Twitter at B5VSDS9. For show notes, you can subscribe to our Substack at B5VSDS9.substack.com. We're available on all major and most minor podcatchers. Please like and subscribe on your podcatcher of choice. If you have a question about either Babylon 5, DS9, this show, or anything else you'd like us to tackle, then leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or another podcatcher. Take a screenshot of your 5-star review and email the screenshot and your question to us at noticeapattern b5vsds9@gmail.com, and we will answer your question on the show. We plan to start a Patreon with bonus content in the near future. If you have any ideas of material or stuff you'd like us to cover for bonus episodes, please email us at, again, b5vsds9@gmail.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Babylon 5 versus Deep Space Nine. This is Bob from Cascadia. I got Matt from the Southland on the line. How you doing today, Matt?
Doing pretty good. It's a Sunday morning. It's pretty nice outside here, and I got a nice tall glass of sweet tea, so I think we're good to go.
Nice. Well, to fit the regional theme, I'm in the Northwest. It's not light yet, and my tea has gone cold. So, all right. So we're here to talk episode 2 of Babylon 5, season 1, Soul Hunter, that aired on February 2nd, 1993. And we'll also be talking the episode Q list of season 1, Deep Space Nine, which I believe is episode 7. Yeah, I'm almost positive it's episode 7, but don't quote me on that. And that aired on February the 6th, 1993. So Matt, do you want to lead off and walk us through the A plot of Soul Hunter?
There's a member of this mysterious and hated alien race that are known as the Soul Hunters. They come to Babylon 5 to collect an important person's soul after their death. In the process, they provoke some small revelations about Ambassador Lin and Minbari culture. The interesting thing about this is we really don't know, at the beginning, we really don't know who the Soul Hunter's coming for. It just slowly develops so you find out that it's actually Delenn.
Yeah. It's one of those interesting kind of techniques I think you see a lot in Babylon 5, or a lot of in science fiction in general, where it's like there's this mysterious and hated alien race, and it's like every other species seems to know about them, but humans are unaware. And so it's a sort of interesting trope. And I guess before we get into the B plot, I did want to kind of go ahead and ask you, and this is at the risk of a little bit of spoilers, but we're kind of seeing this slow drip of revelations about the Minbari. We have the rogue Minbari at the end of the gathering telling Sinclair there's a hole in his mind. We have the Soul Hunter during the climax of this episode screaming at Sinclair that they, meaning the Minbari, are using you. And then we also have the Hunter revealing to Sinclair that Delenn is actually a Satai, which is the Minbari term for a member of the ruling council, the Gray Council. So I was kind of wondering, what are you thinking about this kind of slow drip of revelations?
I caught on to a lot more of this in this particular episode. This episode was very focused on Delenn. I think that I got a better understanding of her character. She's not just simply an ambassador. There's probably something more to her. I felt like at one point, I believe the Soul Hunter says that you're a leader playing an ambassador or something like that, to that nature. I just felt like I learned more about Delenn through this episode than I have in the others.
Yeah. And I guess it is sort of like her first spotlight episode, because the the both the TV movie and Midnight on the Firing Line, the first episode of the show, they seem to more center the conflict between Jakar and Londo. And were Jakar and Londo even in this episode?
They weren't. They don't
They
show up
were.
at all. Neither does Vosh.
Vosh not showing up is not, or rather, Kosh not showing up is not in.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
I'm
already
confusing
jumping ahead
my,
to nine.
I'm confusing Bash with Vosh. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, yeah.
Heard in a
But
minute.
yeah, Kosh showing up is not uncommon during the course of the series. Yeah, usually I feel like maybe we'll disprove this, but usually it feels like Jakar, Londo, and Delenn are in most episodes. So it's kind of interesting. But it just kind of shows the sort of flexibility of Babylon 5, which seems a lot more willing to not have characters appear if they're not relevant to a given episode. We sort of Talia Winters doesn't show up in this one either. And obviously there's some Star Trek and some Deep Space Nine episodes where characters don't show up, but on the whole, you tend to see most characters in most episodes.
At the very end of the episode, Delenn says to Sinclair, we were right about you, which just adds more mystery to something. I don't know what it is at this point, but I'm assuming there's some connection there between Delenn and Sinclair that we haven't explored yet.
Yeah, no, that's a good catch. I didn't catch that, but yeah, definitely that's another kind of part of this slow drip of revelations. It is interesting that, and I'll try to be vague here, but as far as I know, I might be wrong about this, but I don't think the Soul Hunters ever show up in a regular episode of Babylon 5 again. So I think like Sinclair's line to like the second Soul Hunter at the end that Babylon 5 is off limits, it holds for a long time at least. Although one of the final TV movies about Babylon 5 is called The River of Souls. And as the title implies, I think the Soul Hunters do have a role in that TV movie. But unless I'm mistaken, I don't think they show up in the series again.
Moving into the B plot, this kind of touches on that. Tell us a little bit about Dr. Franklin. He didn't have a huge role in this episode. He is introduced to us.
Kind of in accordance with what we were saying about Babylon 5 not using characters unless they're needed, even main characters. You kind of feel like he maybe wouldn't have been in this episode at all, except for the fact that we were being introduced to him. But yeah, we get introduced to Dr. Franklin. And we see him meet a few of his colleagues. We see him meet Garibaldi and Sinclair and Ivanova, and then we have to see him deal with a couple of medical issues related to the arrivals of the Soul Hunter. There were a couple things I did want to flag about Franklin. One was like our prior doctor, played by Johnny Seska in The Gathering. Franklin is, some sort of like xenobiologist or xenomedical specialist, and he seems to be like a generalist in alien anatomies. And it does continue to be a big plot focus of this episode and The Gathering about like the different alien biologies and how that's a real challenge. And then another thing was kind of a small detail that I liked is that he arrives on the ship Asimov at the beginning, which is a nice little homage to Isaac Asimov. He's one of the great U.S. science fiction writers. He wrote the Robot trilogy and the Foundation trilogy. Interestingly, before Asimov's parents brought him to the U.S., he was a Russian Jew, rather like Commander Ivanova. So, Matt, what did you think of Dr. Franklin? I mean, we don't see much of him, but do you have any thoughts on him or in comparison with the doctor played by Johnny Seska from The Gathering?
I didn't see much of him, honestly. He does go straight to work, though. I give him that. Like, he shows up the same day, and then the Soul Hunters are there, and he has to work on him, and then he has to also heal the guy that was killed. From is it Down Below? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Down Below is what it's called.
Yeah, and this is our first exposure to that area of the station. I thought it was strange that there's like a homeless area or a poor district within Babylon 5.
Yeah, has that already been explained, or is the explanation forthcoming? Do you remember? I kind of get lost on what I've seen.
That's the first time I've seen it, honestly. Like, when I saw it, I was like, what on earth? Where are they at? And then I'm like, oh, they're actually on the station. Okay. Is there a reasoning behind that?
There is. And it should be revealed in an episode or two. I think it's revealed pretty early on, but yeah. So yeah, we'll look forward to that. Um, did you have any final points about Soul Hunter before we transition over to Q list? I had like one other thing I wanted to flag.
I'm pretty much Soul Hunter. We got it covered. I think we're good.
Yeah, yeah. So the only other thing I would flag, and you know, I don't particularly like love the Soul Hunter as like a concept for an alien species or as a character. I didn't find him that particularly interesting, but he does have a line to Dr. Franklin, I think, that's yeah something to the effect if you could only see. And granted, it's a kind of that if you could only see is a kind of common line, or you know, it's a line you can imagine someone saying, but it kind of felt to me like a pale echo or a pale reflection of Roy Batty, played by Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner. He has a famous line, "Chew, if only you could see what I've seen with your eyes." And later in the climax of Blade Runner from 1981, Roy Batty, played by Rutger Hauer, expands on that motif of seeing a little bit. So that you know, that's one of the best lines in a science fiction film of all time. And, you know, it's gotten sampled a lot in different sorts of like dance music and electronic music. So it was just kind of an interesting connection. Did you want to walk
Yeah.
us? Oh, go ahead.
Well,
Sorry.
when you mentioned that, I thought that song pops in my head. For it was night. It was from 1996. It was an artist known as Tonic. I'm probably a one hit wonder, but if you could only see, if you could
Oh,
only
God.
see,
Th-
that's all
thanks
it
for
popped in.
totally ruining it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Maybe they were watching Soul Hunter and it came to it inspired them.
Well,
All right.
I don't know. Soul Hunter, it can be ruined, but the implication of that pop song with Blade Runner does kind of tarnish my love for Blade Runner. All right. Did you
All
want
right.
to
So
walk us through the A plot of Q-less, which is season 1, episode 7 of Deep Space Nine?
let's talk Q-less. There's some technological problems going on Deep Space Nine. The power keeps going out in different sectors of the station. There was a problem on one of the runabouts where Dax and some other beings were trapped on it was the runabout was called Ganges, by the way, and they're afraid that the station is actually going to be tossed into the wormhole. Q though shows up out of nowhere along with Vash, who we last saw in Star Trek: The Next Generation. The episode was called
Cupid.
It was the one where they dress up like Robin Hood in the
Cupid.
Cupid, yeah, Cupid. And that was the last time we saw Vash. She's there as well. They're trying to put the blame on Q, but as the episode progresses, you learn that Q really has nothing to do with it. It's just it's something that Vash has in her possession that's causing this problem, and you know they all work together to solve it and figure out what happened.
Yeah, yeah, it was sort of interesting. I kind of said in my notes that I got Encounter with Farpoint vibes off this episode, which, if folks don't know, was the pilot of Star Trek: The Next Generation. And it was a sort of similar setup where there was a mysterious life form that was caught, you know, threatening the integrity of a starbase. You know, both Captain Picard in Encounter at Farpoint and Captain Sisko in Q-less initially assume that Q is to blame because he's kind of showing up and taunting them about the mystery. But then it kind of works out that it's not, you know, in neither case is Q responsible. It's this new form of life. And then the revelation of the new form of life at the end of Q-less, yeah, even though the design is different from the alien at the end of Encounter at Farpoint, it does give you kind of big vibes of that, I felt like.
Right, and the whole reasoning behind Q being on the station is just to convince Vash to go along with him, and not, you know, he really has no reason to be at the Deep Space Nine other than Vash.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because like in Encounter at Farpoint, like, you know, Q is specifically there to like judge the human race as a whole through like how the Enterprise performs in this mystery, and they even go back to that in the Next Generation series finale, All Good Things. But here it's much more mundane. He's just trying to get his girlfriend back.
One of the really interesting things, though, is that we have these characters that were established in Next Generation are now in DS9, kind of continuing that trend of bringing over, building a universe within two separate television shows. You're on air at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, and partly that's a result of our selection bias because we did episodes 1 and 2, The Emissary, and then we did episode 3, Past Prologue, and now we've jumped to episode 7. And in all 4 of those episodes, you have not just Chief O'Brien, but other characters who actually appeared on the Next Generation. So Lursa and B'Etor in episode 3, past prologue, Picard himself in the Emissary two-parter, and then now you have both Vash and Q. And so it's a little bit of a product of our self-selection, but it is interesting how much Deep Space Nine is leaning on characters from the Next Generation at this early point in its run.
You're talking about the name of the shuttle on Babylon 5 that brought Franklin, the Ganges.
No, the Azimuth is the one that brought Franklin to Babylon 5, and the Ganges is the name of the runabout.
The Ganges, though, the only, I mean, other than just being the name of the river, there's nothing behind that, right?
Yeah, no, it's just all the runabouts are named after rivers. You got the Rio Grande and the Yangtze Kiang, and then I think the Yangtze Kiang gets destroyed, but I don't remember what the replacement is. And they're called the runabouts are Danube class runabouts. So all rivers.
The thing store just went over my head, Bob. Thanks. That's
Glad to help.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense then. All right.
One other thing I would frame really briefly before we keep moving was, even though like we're saying that DS9 is kind of very much operating under the shadow of TNG, of Next Gen, they are really aggressively trying to escape that in this episode, right? Because we have the sort of Cisco and Q relationship is played in a very different way than the Picard and the Q relationship is, and kind of famously climaxes in a boxing match where Cisco like gives Q a pretty mean 1-2, and Q kind of famously yells, "Picard never hit me," and Cisco kind of yells back, "I'm not Picard."
Cisco flat out just clocks him, and he doesn't put up with him at all. Like it's, you can tell that Cisco is very different. Has a very different opinion of Q. Although I'm curious, and I think we discussed this a little bit prior, but Cisco has never met Q before, but has the reports on Q from the Enterprise, so he knows already kind of what Q's motives are. I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So it's like he's operating a little bit with the benefit of Picard's experience, because if this were the first time Q was meeting humanity, it seems pretty likely that Cisco would not slug Q. But since he knows about the more trickstery things that Q has gotten up to in the late seasons of Next Generation, I think he feels freer to just wallop him.
The interesting thing too, before we move on, just wanted to point out that looking at both of these episodes, Babylon 5 and DS9, the Soul Hunters are considered immortal, correct?
I didn't get that, but maybe I missed it.
I think they are. I read it somewhere, or maybe they mentioned it during the episode, but I did mark it in my notes. But also Q is immortal, so it's like they both have these immortal beings visiting their stations, and handle things very differently.
I kind of have to say though, as a storytelling device, I don't think that makes much sense in Babylon 5, just because like the whole gimmick of the Soul Hunters is that they're trying to overcome the finitude of death, and they're trying to preserve these souls after death. And so I guess you could make an argument that like, okay, they themselves don't in the normal course of their existence experience death, and so maybe that's why they regard death as so horrific. But on the other hand, it's like, given that they don't die, that if that's right, that just, I don't know, that just seems to kind of undercut their gimmick for me, like on a kind of like aesthetic.
Apparently they live, looking it up, they live upwards of 1,000. They live for thousands of years.
Okay.
So then, they may as well be,
yeah,
I guess.
Well, and they do make a big point about like stressing human lifespan in the episode, right? There's that scene where Ivanova and Franklin are sending the casket of the poor man into the sun of the station, or into the sun of the system that Babylon 5 is in. And, they kind of have a conversation about how, the human lifespan at this point in history is about 100 years. And Ivanova, being a Russian pessimist, is like, well, even if we lived for 200 years, we would still just be human.
So you want to talk about B plot for DS9?
Yeah. So we've got Q's ex-girlfriend, who's also Picard's ex-girlfriend from the Next Generation, Vash, an archaeologist and a thief, and she's arranging an auction with Quark to sell her stolen relics from the Gamma Quadrant that she got while caravanting around with Q.
So do you think Vosh going with Q was a step up from Picard? Picard?
Well, I mean, if you take the subtext people see between Picard and Q seriously, then it's sort of Q's way of getting back at Picard for not reciprocating his romantic interest. But it is sort of interesting. I haven't watched the episode Cupid in a long time, which is the one where Q transports the next gen crew to a replica of Sherwood Forest, and they have an adventure, right, and it ends with Vash and Q going off together. But I haven't watched that in a long time. But it does seem like Q dating Picard's ex is a sort of way of kind of needling him, even if you don't read a romantic subtext between Q and Picard.
One odd thing too with Vash is the scene where she performs Umax, I can't say it right, Umax on Quark. That was very odd. I don't know how I felt about that. it felt dirty. It really did. It felt dirty. Like I watched it. I'm like, this is not okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is like the way that Armin Shimmerman as Quark like played up receiving it. Like, yes, that really added to it. I thought it was delightful, especially the way like she was strategically intensifying and then slowing her stroking of his ears, and then she immediately stops once the deal is done. I just thought that was deeply hilarious. I did think the episode did some interesting things about constructing like romantic triangles and constructing parallels between characters. So like one interesting thing is that we've already seen a little on the show that both Quark and Dr. Bashir are interested in Jadzia Dax. Like, they both think she's very attractive. They're both potentially romantically interested in her. And, Bashir in particular has been pursuing her pretty heavily. And then we sort of have that romantic triangle replicated again, where both Bashir and Quark seem very interested in Vash, but Quark wins out. Although partly he wins out because of Q's interference and putting Bashir to sleep for most of the rest of the episode.
Yeah, Bashir's pretty much like a hopeless romantic in this series. I've noticed already. He just, and even the beginning of the episode where he's trying to he's flirting with the Bajoran.
Yeah,
and he tells her about the medical exam that he took and how he like got the answers right just in time. That's just like, it's like he doesn't have much game, but he likes to flirt with every woman on the station.
Yeah. You say hopeless romantic. I would say like shameless flirt and perpetually striking out. Although the weird thing is the medical school exam stories do seem to be moving that Bajoran girl. She seems to be into
she was excited about it.
Yeah, which
she was happy though that he was a salutatory and not a valedictorian though.
Which I mean, I just can't imagine anyone ever being interested in someone's academic standing. That's horrific. Yeah. But yeah, I maybe her interest in the story is just a pretext. But yeah, it is interesting that like on the one hand we keep having Bashir striking out with women like Dax and Vash and even this Bajoran woman, and then on the other hand we have the specter of plain and simple Garrick always over his shoulder. So that's a sort of funny parallel. Another parallel that I thought was sort of interesting was that you sort of mirror in this episode Q and Vash's relationship and Odo and Quark's. But both Vash and Quark are going all in on this auction on these stolen archaeological relics, and both Q and Odo have a lot of contempt for what Vash and Quark are doing. And they both Q and Odo have like explicit condemnations of like the crass commercialism of selling these items. So I don't know. I just thought that was a kind of really interesting parallel that put Q and Odo on sort of the same level. I did want to ask, Did you enjoy Vash on the episode as much as I did? Because like I really enjoyed her, and I'm kind of sad this is basically the last time she shows up in Star Trek.
Right, it is the last time. Yeah, I enjoyed her character. It's just having that whole being an archaeologist, being there as someone who's not Starfleet, that perspective. She's there for money. Her whole characterization piece too, just is having the connection to Q. There's just a lot of character there that I feel like they could have expanded on had she been in more episodes.
Yeah, yeah, and that way she's almost like the role Harry Mudd plays in like the original
Yes,
series or in Disco, but not as like creepy or as overtly
correct.
violent as Harry Mudd can
I
be.
didn't even I did not make that connection, but that is absolutely true. She is like the Harry Mudd of yeah.
It just kind of seems a shame because I mean, like because you have the thing at the end where Vash seems to like, no, this was her last job. She wants a quiet life back in academic archaeology on Earth. She's booked passage, and then kind of as a parting thing, Q tells her why he valued spending time with her. Like he valued seeing the things he's already seen before, but through her eyes and seeing her sense of wonder. Then he leaves, and that sort of explanation or confession from Q sort of inspires her to go back to stealing relics and exploring the galaxy. And yeah, I mean, the way I read the end of the episode was it seems like Vash and Quark are going to continue both their sexual relationship and their thief and fence relationship. But yeah, we Vash. This is the last episode of any Star Trek that Vash is in so far, and I was looking on Memory Beta, which is the reference work for like the extended Star Trek universe of like novels and games, and she shows up in a couple places, but not that much. And honestly, the plot descriptions don't sound good or promising, or like they kind of fulfill the potential premise you could have had of like Vash returning to DS9 a couple of times with more trouble from other different expeditions. So I don't know. It's just a shame. Apparently, the showrunner had thought about bringing Vash back to DS9 in season 6, according to Memory Alpha, but he just couldn't get the plot nailed down, and so he never wrote it.
Another character too that you learn a little bit about. I learned that Odo was pretty much like a workaholic, addicted to his job.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
thing between he and Quark, uh, and that he can't really be. He wasn't interested in the things Quark was selling. But like Quark did offer him a latinum plated bucket, and there's just a second there where Odo actually considers it. Like and that to me was like, wow, that's he has like the saddest life. I just don't know. You feel bad for him to some degree. But he
Yeah,
does he
yeah.
does a good job on the station. He does a good job. I give him that. He's good. He's great at what he does. But
Yeah, I did watch a couple of the episodes that we skipped over last night, and in one of them, Odo confesses to Quark that he also just he has and has never had any interest in any romantic entanglements.
oh
So
gosh,
yeah,
yeah. So
basically Odo is both a virgin and well, I guess Volcel, not incel. But
yeah,
yeah, it's you feel bad for the guy.
yeah. It's pretty sad. Any comparisons or anything that we can make between the two episodes that we haven't already mentioned?
Yeah, did you have anything more you wanted to say about how the DS9 staff would have handled the Soul Hunter?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that because we brought up some hypotheticals of what would have happened if the Soul Hunter arrived at DS9 and one of the characters there was meant to die. Um, I feel like they really probably would have worked more as a team, uh, trying to figure everything out. Like we've talked about before, every single character on the show appears almost every episode. It seems like, while there are certain episodes that are character centered, you always like even this episode, Odo's appearance like didn't even need to happen. He really didn't have a huge part in the episode. They brought him in anyway, just because they want to make sure that everyone knows those characters are there. They're the main characters. I feel like they would have come to some conclusion about the Soul Hunter immediately. I don't think they would have kept him on the station as long as Sinclair let him stay on Babylon 5. I
Yeah,
also don't
yeah.
think Cisco would have gone out and tried to stop him. I think Cisco would have sent someone else out to retrieve him. Once we talked about this in the last episode as well. Sinclair goes out to rescue the Soul Hunter. The Soul Hunter ship is about to hit Babylon 5. Sinclair goes out in a ship, grabs onto the Soul Hunter, and brings him in. And he's like really close to hitting the station and causing like critical damage. Why would the main commander of the ship be the one to go out and do that? Like, why would he not send someone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think partly it's just economy of characters.
Yeah.
And like I said, partly it does seem like there is a kind of like action movie envisionment that they have for Sinclair at the start of the series. Like this is something I kind of noticed as a common trope across both the Gathering and off this episode, the Soul Hunter, and it's also something DS9 kind of does. And that at the end of Q-less is that kind of plot climax in all three of those episodes is that there's a big station-wide dragnet, and it's kind of been
Mm-hmm.
on a tight deadline and under desperate situations. But I think you're absolutely right that usually Cisco delegates that a lot more to his staff, whereas there's just not as much staff on Babylon 5, at least as like, like named visible characters to delegate to. And so usually at this point, it's like Sinclair and Garibaldi like going out together as kind of like buddy cop duo to resolve the action plot.
I think too that if the Soul Hunter had arrived at DS9, if there was a character he was targeting, it would probably be Dax. There would be
I hadn't
something
thought
really
about
cool
that.
they
That
could
makes
do.
total sense. That makes total
There could be
sense.
something, yeah, there could be something really cool they could do there with her being like a trill and having so many different. I guess it's almost like she has multiple souls. I guess you could say, or it would be. They'd have to explain it in some way that is,
Yeah, I
makes
would
sense with the
actually
plot. But
disagree. I would actually disagree a little bit with like multiple souls though, because and this could be influenced by I'm currently teaching this novel called Memory called Empire that sort of deals with a similar idea. It's not exactly the same as the Trill symbiote, but to me it seems like the idea of the Trill is like it's integrated. So it's like there's only one soul, and that one soul includes the Dax symbiote itself, as well as the memories and personalities of Jadzia and Curzon and all the other prior Dax hosts whose names I can't remember. So I would almost think of it as just being like one very special soul that the Soul Hunter would want.
so there you go. See that would be a fantastic plot then, because then you could have like, okay, this Trill within Dax. I'm sorry, this the symbiote within Dax contains not multiple souls, but like an expansive soul that's lasted for way longer than others and has seen so much in one entity. I guess that would be the cool way they could come in and bring the Soul Hunter on. I was trying to think of ways you can. I don't think there are any other characters other than if you want to do like Odo and say like he doesn't have a soul or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's only solids get souls. Sorry,
Yeah,
Odo. Jeez,
right.
yeah, that would be rough. I did kind of want to ask, did you find the concept of the Soul Hunter like useful for like a science fictional universe, or did it feel a little bit too religious or a little bit too mystical or woo woo?
It was super mystical. Like, I mean, it was beyond when he hooks Daylin into the machine or whatever that drains their soul,
Mm-hmm.
and there's blood coming out of her, and you see the image of I guess her soul is showing up in a little ball or whatever. It just seemed real weird and a little too much mysticism for my taste for sci-fi. But I mean, once again, that's
Yeah,
just my opinion. I'm not like,
yeah.
I mean, I thought it was okay. But another thing too, and this is a little off into the weeds somewhat, but I feel like if you really wanted to prove that DS9 may have copied some from Babylon 5, had they taken the thing that was in Vasha's box and not actually shown you what it was, but just had the bright light shining out, we would have like concrete evidence right there.
Although, I mean that was an available trope, like
Right.
Kiss Me Deadly did it in the 50s, and Pulp Fiction did it shortly after Babylon 5. So it's
Right.
it's an available trope. But yeah,
Right.
and
If
we'll
they didn't, they
definitely
just showed
talk
you
about more stuff as we keep going. That it really makes you wonder about where some of the DS9 content came from, because there's some other connections that are just kind of mind boggling that we'll get to.
yeah. But so
Great,
it
great.
was just mainly it was a cocoon, and then I guess it turns into an alien of some sort, an amoeba thing that flows out into space. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And we're not finished with cocoons. Don't you worry.
yeah.
A big cocoon is coming. For a final point, maybe to close out on, I just kind of wanted to ask. You said you'd seen some connections or vibes with Twin Peaks, especially Twin Peaks season 3, The Return. Did you want to expand on those between the Soul Hunter and Twin Peaks: The Return?
Yeah, the Soul Hunter, the orbs just reminded me of what we saw and what we were able to see in 20 years later, and was it 20? No, it would be
25,
15 years later in
25.
20. Good grief. Wow, you're
We're
right.
old, Matt. We're old.
Yeah, we're super old. Dang. All right, anyway, 25 years later, we see the orbs and similar concept, just with the orbs floating. You have the picture of the person within the orb. It just reminded me of that, some of those scenes from Twin Peaks. And also, there's just the creepiness of the Soul Hunter, the way he spoke reminded me of some of what you hear, in the lodge, just the creepiness there. I haven't
Yeah,
picked
that
up
kind of
too much
deliberate
on.
pacing. Yeah, that makes
Yes,
sense.
yeah. That
I would,
was
I
really
would
about it
say
for.
that the Soul Hunters like makeup kind of undercuts that a little for me, because like I think the great surrealness of Twin Peaks is like the fact that you'll have characters who pretty much present as normal, at least in the first two seasons. I mean, they may be dressed funnily, or they may not be body typical, but you pretty much normal seeming characters who are actually spirits and speak in like very strange and paradoxical ways. Whereas when you have somebody in like the Soul Hunter makeup doing that, to me, it maybe drains it a little of the like effective surrealism you get from Twin Peaks.
Yeah, you say that, but we had the giant mantis or whatever in the Soul Hunter episode that I don't think comes back. I would hope not. It looked like a Power Ranger villain. Talking about the merchant,
Oh, the
the locust
insectoid
merchant thing.
broker who sells the
It,
Soul Hunter,
it
the
still from the
security guy.
level 5 clearance. Yeah, that
I
guy.
think he comes back a couple of times, but I don't. I get the sense he might have been a major character, but they decided not to go that way. A friend who's also watching Babylon 5 right now texted me that he got Big Zorak from Space Ghost Energy.
Yes, that's exactly who he looks like. I didn't even think. Yes, that's exactly who that is. It's like live action Zorak. Yes. Did that come out? Okay, hold on. Now we got to figure this out. When did
Space Ghost Coast to Coast come out?
Yeah, Space Ghost Coast to Coast. I mean, Zorak was there before, like the old school show.
Yeah, because the Space Ghost cartoon is probably from what, the mid or late 60s.
94 is when Space Ghost Coast to
Okay,
Coast came
so
out.
this same year as this episode then.
So wow. Okay. I did not put those two things together, but that is true. All right.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think we had a good and broad ranging discussion. We got from Twin Peaks to Ear Sex to Blade Runner to Space Ghost Coast to Coast. So I
A
think
little bit of everything.
listeners got what they craved. I appreciate you coming on, Matt. This was Bob from Cascadia and Matt from the Southland talking B5 v DS9, and we'll see everybody next time.
Thanks for listening. And remember, you can follow us on Twitter at B5VSDS9. For show notes, subscribe to our Substack, b5vsds9.substack.com. We're available on all major and most minor podcatchers. Please like and subscribe on your podcatcher of choice. If you have a question about either show or anything else you'd like us to tackle, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or another podcatcher. Take a screenshot, email that screenshot to us with your question at b5vsds9@gmail.com, and we will answer your question on the show. We plan to start a Patreon with bonus content in the near future, so if you have any ideas of stuff you'd like to see for bonus episodes, email us at b5vsds9@gmail.com.